Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. While everyone's coming in, I actually want to go ahead and ask you, Kathy, a really quick question just to break the ice. Since we do have Christmas coming up around the corner, really, really close, well, less than a month away, I just wanted to ask you if you had any fun family Christmas traditions that you guys love to do.
Well, right now, since we're in a new area, and I'll talk about that a little bit, we I guess are going to be starting some new traditions. So this year we're actually going to be going to I'll be going up and visiting my family in Atlanta at some time around Christmas. Had some of them down here in Ormond Beach, Florida for Thanksgiving, but what I like doing is going to the Night of Lights in St. Augustine, which is only an hour away. And it's really a famous thing. If you haven't been, you need to try to go at least once. So look that up, Nights of Lights, and it runs through the end of January every
Oh, that
year.
sounds really pretty, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, to keep everything going. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Mindset Mastery: Unlocking Your Potential for Personal and Professional Growth. My name is Chesco Cordero, and I'm from Insightful Accountant, and I will be your host for this webinar. In this webinar, we'll actually be introduced to the concept of being in the right mindset and its importance for personal and professional growth. Sharing her personal story of getting into the right mindset and offering practical ways of developing and cultivating a positive mindset is our lovely speaker for today, Kathy Grosskurth. I will have her introduce herself in just a bit after I cover a few of the housekeeping items, which are that CPE is actually being offered for this session, and you have to be in the session for at least 50 minutes. You also must answer at least 3 of the poll questions which we will be rolling out during the webinar, and you want to make sure to answer the poll question that we have whether or not you would like to receive a CPE certificate. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A panel, and I want you guys to be specific. Don't just say, "What do you mean?" We need you to ask, "What did you mean by you wanted to go and see the lights?" Got to do that. Just mainly because Kathy might really not get to your question right after you put it in there. So if you put in a really vague question, she might not really, well, both of us might really not understand at what point did you send it. So we got to be clear about that. And also, we'll be sending you a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording after the webinar. And it's also actually going to be up on our YouTube page within about 24 hours. And I'll also be putting the link to our YouTube channel into our chat just so you guys have that. And I will be rolling out those links and the copy of a few of the other links that we have throughout this webinar in case you might have missed it. And with that, Kathy, that's all for me. You have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me on. I know we tried to do this earlier in the year. I'm just glad that we were able to work it out to do it now. So anyway, we're going to be talking about how to unlock your potential for personal professional growth. And I want to talk a little bit before I get into all this. We're going to, oops, I went too far. Sorry about that. I'm using a different setup today, so forgive me for my big clumsy fingers here. So some of y'all may know who I am. Some of you may not know who I am, but I am basically a QuickBooks Pro advisor, and I've done a lot of self introspection and a lot of things. But basically what I've done is I've worked on being part of the Trainer Writer Network with Intuit, and some basically right now all QuickBooks. But along with the QuickBooks stuff, I do other types of trainings, and this is kind of one of the things I like to do. But mostly I work with training individual clients and small accounting firms in the proper ways of using QuickBooks. I'm also taught at a few seminars at a few places. So I've also been on the Insightful Accountant Top 100 list since 2019. And today they just announced that they're gearing up for 2024. So if you get that newsletter, you may want to check that out and apply. The only way that you'll get it is if you apply. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and skip over all of this and want to get into some of the overview of what we're talking about today. Now, particularly, we want to cover how to understand what the power mindset is and how it can impact your personal and professional growth. We want to also identify some of the limiting beliefs and negative thought patterns that may be holding not just you, but even me, because, and I'll talk about this when we talk about this in a little bit about how, this is a journey. This is not something you're going to be cured of. And learning practical strategies for developing a growth mindset and transforming your outlook. And I will include some time at the end for Q&A. So like Cordell was saying, go ahead and put your questions in the chat and we'll get to those when we can. But I'm one of those people that like to go ahead and go through the material. And then at the end, we'll have extra time to talk about a lot of this. And I would imagine that we're going to have plenty of extra time because there's not a whole lot to talk about here, but I'm going to talk about some things that really resonate with me, and hopefully it will. And along with me saying that, let me go ahead and show you our disclaimer here. As I am not a professional or licensed professional to talk about these things, I'm just basically sharing this information with you in the hopes that it will help you learn from my experience, some of the mistakes that I've made, and hopefully straighten that curve for your own unique journey. So, basically you just have to understand that I'm giving this to you as is with no guarantees or anything. I just have to say that up front. But I hope that from my experience, you'll learn and some things that may have, that may help you on your journey as you go through. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and go on to this first little. And what I like to do is I like to intersperse little helpful things. And as we are developing our mindset, this has been really helpful for me to look at things that are motivational and help my mind to embrace some of the good and some of the truths that we need to understand in order to put ourselves in that kind of frame of mind. So C.S. Lewis has a really good quote here. Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. And a lot of this stuff, if you see it enough, you're going to believe it. And we'll talk about some of that when we get into some of the other material there. And here's another quote that also resonated, not really a quote per se, but I found this graphic and I have no idea who did this or who to attribute it to. And I will tell you if I don't know, but sometimes, and in part of my process, I like going through and pulling out these things and looking at them to help me, especially if I'm having a real hard day or something. I can go back and look at these things, and it reminds me of where I have come from and, help to keep me on that path. So we just have to remember, first of all, that life is never going to be easy. It will always be hard, but we can choose our hard. We can choose wisely. And in that part that I cut up off at the top, it says marriage is hard, communication is hard. There's a few other things that are hard that it talks about, and it talks about choosing your hard. So, we never want to seek the easy way out because we don't learn if we seek the easy way out. We need to be able to pick and choose what our hard is going to be. And I hope that makes sense to you. So with that said, let's go ahead and go on into our first polling question. So we'll go ahead and launch that now, because I'd like to see your feedback on this and whether or not you previously considered the concept of mindset and its influence on personal and professional growth. And I think you have like a minute or so in order to respond to that. So, but you need at least 3 out of 4 of the questions that we're going to be doing in order to get credit if you're doing the CP. So it doesn't matter how you answer. And I haven't been keeping up with the time, so hopefully you've been doing that on your end there. So probably give it a few more seconds here, and then we can go ahead and close that out. And I won't be able to see y'all's responses until it's been closed out, and then she'll share those. Wow. So it looks like almost 2/3 of you have considered this. So that's good to know. That's good to know. So this isn't a new concept to you. So wonderful, wonderful. All right, so let's go ahead and go on to the next thing here. And this is something that I was looking back on when I was going through some of my stuff, and this is really true. We all want to make excuses as to why we can't do something. It's going to be too hard to do. But you have to remember, every day is a gift. Every day we have a new opportunity to do something worthwhile to help ourselves or to help others. So to the extent that I saw this today, and I was putting together the rest of the slideshow up until almost the time that we started here, because I wanted to include some really good information that will hopefully resonate with some of you. But when I saw this morning, I thought, oh, this is perfect. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Make it count. So you can make every day count. Whether or not you choose to believe that, hopefully you'll get to the point where you will believe that. But just remember that you being here right now is no accident. So today is the first day of the rest of your life. Make it count. And then sometimes what you're most afraid of doing is the very thing that will set you free. So a lot of times we do not believe that whatever we do is going to make a difference. But sometimes we've got to take that chance and we've got to say, you know, I want better for myself. And so in the realm that we want better for ourselves, then we need to make sure that we understand that, you know, we are going to be afraid. But if we work through that fear, then we'll reap so much more benefits out of it than we will if we just don't do anything at all. So with that said, we're going to talk about the definition of mindset. And you really can't do much of anything until you can grasp this concept and understand how important it is to where you're going, because mindset pretty much determines your outlook on everything. Your mindset is a set of beliefs that shape how you make sense of the world and yourself, and it influences how you think, feel, and behave in any given situation. It also means that what you believe about yourself impacts your success in your future. And the thing about mindset that I hope you'll understand is that, you know, we may come from terrible backgrounds. I'll talk a little bit about my history in a little bit, but sometimes and oftentimes how we're brought up will inform what we do today, what we're doing right now. So to the extent that we try to ignore it, or we try to push it down, or we try to even not even acknowledge that it exists, is one of those things that's going to impact what we see today and how we interpret how we're going to handle different situations. So from that perspective, it's very important to understand. And then we also, and like I was saying, just to kind of carry on that thought, it plays a significant role, your mindset does, in achieving success. And it's all connected, because mindset not only influences attitude, and then when you have a bad attitude, it's going to influence your behavior in a bad way. It's going to influence that action. And then if you have a good mindset, or as you're working on your mindset, it's going to influence your attitude, which in turn will influence your behavior. It will influence your action, and then it will also influence success. So all these are interconnected, and the better you are able to manage your mindset in a positive way, or have it moving in that positive trajectory, then the better your behavior is going to be, your attitude, your action, and then that's going to lead you to success. And one thing I will say about success is success looks different from one person to another. You cannot compare yourself to other people. We are unique individuals. And to the extent that we continue to compare ourselves with other people and seeing what they're doing. And one thing I also wanted to mention about social media, which I don't include in this particular per se, is that sometimes social media, what people put out there is what they want to show of their best side. And we have to remember that. I'm guilty of that too. So not very many people want to share the negativity or any problems that they're suffering, because they want to put the best foot forward. So we cannot compare ourselves to what we see on social media. So just remember that. I know it's hard sometimes, especially if you spend a lot of time on there and you see all these people doing great things. They're having all these wonderful speaking engagements. So you've got to remember all of that. So with that said, and this is something else that I posted on Facebook, and I can't remember when this was, probably about a couple of years ago. because I know that some people needed some reminders and I needed it for myself. So a lot of times when I post something on there, it's because a lot of times I need it for myself. And if I see it, then it's like I have one finger pointed at someone else. I have 7 pointed back at me. So in this instance, I wanted to remember that to focus on the future, we must let go of our parts of our past, which hold us back. So to the extent that we're unable or unwilling or unable, to hold back those pasts or let those things go or even acknowledge them, it's going to be kind of like a stranglehold keeping us from doing what we need to do. That's why it's so important, because even though we may have repressed it down, somehow it's going to come back and interfere. So we need to do what we can to let that go. And then there's going to be times when you're at a crossroads. I was corresponding with a person this morning that was upset that they didn't get picked for this opportunity. And I'm always a believer that when one door closes, another one opens. And this person shared that an opportunity came up that may be an open door for her. So all I will say to that, and this resonated with me when I saw it today, is that, and suddenly you just know it's time to start something new and trust in the magic of beginnings. And a lot of times we have a hard time trusting, especially if we came from circumstances where trust was not a given or trust was not provided, or if you were in a situation where maybe you were in an unstable or a dysfunctional household, and it's hard to trust, or you may misplace your trust. So those things are very hard to overcome sometimes. So, but sometimes you just know that it's time to do. So with that being said, I'm going to share a little bit about my personal story. And I'm not sure what I'm going to try to keep a touch on the time. Yeah, I'm doing good time wise. So, and I alluded to this. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. My dad is a career Marine, and him and my mom probably shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. And they were very combative. I don't remember a day in the time that I was growing up that there was not peace in the household. I had 2 other siblings, and I know it affected them as well. And just for the longest time, I did not, what I thought was normal was not really normal. And it wasn't until I was teenage age that I discovered or figured out that I was in what I considered a dysfunctional environment. My mom was an alcoholic. In my teen years, I remember them fighting a lot, to the point where my mom would physically throw stuff at my dad. It was terrible. I mean, I know that people out there probably have much, much worse. But just imagine as a child having all that insecurity around you, having all that issues around you. I was also bullied too at a very young age, going all the way through middle school. And my parents didn't know how to handle that really well. My dad was one of those that was just like, oh, that's just kids being kids, all this kind of stuff. And it really affected me badly, to the point that when he retired from the military and we moved back to the Atlanta area, I thought, well, okay, I'm getting away from all that, and that is going to be it. I don't have to deal with it anymore. Blissful life from here forward. Well, as time went on and as I grew up, I ended up just having everything that I saw was filtered through all that negativity that I saw. And it wasn't until I started going to a particular place of worship where they were talking about the concept of boundaries that I discovered that, hey, this wasn't right. I needed to deal with this if I was going to make something of myself and be able to help others. And so I had to start working on changing that mindset with a more positive outlook. And around that same time, I started watching some of the early Dr. Phil McGraw shows on the TV, but he came out with a book. And one of the quotes in that book resonated with me, and it's right here. You cannot change what you don't acknowledge. So all those years of me repressing all that stuff that I had to deal with and everything, I knew that I had to deal with it. I knew it was going to be a painful process. I knew it was not going to be easy, but I knew in order to be able to move forward in my life that I had to do that. And so I started reading a lot of self-help books. I started surrounding myself with a lot of positive people. I started kind of getting away from some of the negative people that I was hanging around with, because negativity begats negativity. And boy, we would triangulate about, how this person did this and all that. And when I got to the point where I realized that that was really destructive and toxic, and started substituting that for more positive experiences, more positive people. And that's when my life turned around. And then fast forward to when the pandemic came, that was when I first started seeking therapy. And it wasn't that I was fighting the therapy all that time before. I just didn't feel like I was in a place where I needed it then. But the pandemic, I think, kind of threw everybody in a loop. I don't know if there was not anybody that was not affected by the pandemic. And it certainly brought up some things that I still had to deal with. So going through that therapy helped me as well. So I see myself as on a continuous journey where I'm not going to arrive. And that's why mindset mastery is not really so much overcoming it. It's a journey that you're on. It's something that you're going to manage, kind of like alcoholism. If any of you have had issues with alcohol, and the AA concept where you're managing the illness, it's there, you're managing it. It's never going to go away, but you're managing it. And that's kind of what we want to do with this mindset thing. We're on a trajectory where we're managing it and hopefully making ourselves better as we go along. So and every day is a new day, and every day is one that we can choose to do better. We can always have that choice. And that's something I want you to understand. You do have a choice. You have a choice in how you want to live your life. You have a choice if you want to make your mind better. You just have to choose it. And hopefully in some of the things that we're going to talk about are things that are going to help you on that journey if you haven't done so already. This is a plaque that was hanging up in a clothing closet that I was volunteering at. And it kind of ties in right along with what we're saying here. Happiness is something that is given. It isn't something that is given. It is something that you make. So you have the opportunity to change yourself to be more happy. You have that choice. You have to want it. You have to own that you want it and make those moves that you need to make in order to secure it. And then in this realm, we're talking here about how sometimes you have to let go of what you thought life would be like and learn to find joy in the story that you're living. You have to, even in the midst of some of the things that you might be going through, they may be really bad things. They may be terrible things, much worse than anything that I've ever gone through. But you have the opportunity to make the choice to find even one little thing out of that day, out of that circumstance that may bring you joy. And the more that you can do that, the more that you can think about those things that are joyous out of those bad things, the more you can find those gold nuggets out of those bad things. You start adding them up and looking at them. I'll tell you, it made a big difference in my life, and hopefully it will in yours too. And the thing about mindset, and I'll go back to this again and again, in order for you to be able to move on that positive journey, you've got to get that mindset right. Because if you go forth in negativity, that's what it's going to sow. It's going to sow negativity. So it's so important to change that around if you can. So we're going to talk about some ways to develop a positive mindset. And by no means, this is not every single thing that you can be doing. But these are some simple things, hopefully, that you can take away with you today and start doing these things if you're not doing them already. So one of the first things that you need to do is to recognize and identify limiting beliefs and negative thought patterns. And that means you may have to sit down with a pencil or a pen and a pad of paper or something and start writing some of these things down. And even when you're interacting with people, you may end up having to like use your cell phone. Like I have it. We all have a cell phone that has a app that we can record different thoughts and everything, kind of like a notepad that we can do. So maybe not at that particular time you're dealing with it, but shortly thereafter, because you want to do it as soon after as it occurs. So that way you don't forget, because you need to make sure you make note of these things. And then you go back in your journal or whatever and synthesize this information, because that's the only way you're going to be able to deal with it, is to recognize it when it's happening so that you can name it. And they say in order to deal with it, you've got to be able to name it. And then you have to choose. You have to choose. What would you rather believe? Would you think that would empower to realize your potential? So you do have the choice. So you can believe that you have what it takes and that you're in this world to make a big contribution, or you can believe that you are not good for anything. I would rather us choose that we are here for a purpose and a reason. So again, going back to that thought, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So hopefully you'll remember that. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And that's all about turning those negative experiences into a positive as much as you can. And then continuing on that thought about ways to develop a positive mindset. This is only one suggestion on how to focus on mindfulness. There's other things out there that you can do, but I found this to be very simple, and it uses the acronym STOP. So in this step, we want to reframe those negative thoughts in a positive way. And it goes through the first 4 things here. Stop any busyness temporarily. Invite our attention to rest on the present moment. And then the T represents taking 3 slow, deep, and mindful breaths. O focuses on observing, labeling 3 sounds around us, or pay curious attention to what we hear, touch, or see. And then P is proceed with whatever we need to do mindfully and with a smile. And there's more, and I've got a link to the resources and everything that I use in this presentation at the end, and it'll be part of the PDF that I will generate and get to y'all. And the reason why I don't have it ready now is because I was saying, I was putting slides in up until the very last minute because I wanted to include some stuff in here that hopefully will be helpful to y'all. So again, going back to positive thoughts, generate positive feelings and attract positive life experiences. I know that sounds trite, but really, if you get into the habit of focusing on things that go well for you and can focus on those things and start writing those things down, then that is going to go a long ways towards helping you retrain your mind. And one of the things that we need to remember too is that this isn't going to be an instantaneous process. It's going to take some time. So it's not something that's going to happen right away. But I do promise you, if you put forth the effort and do some of these things, then you're going to see some results. The key is you want to start where you're at. You want to use what you have and do what you can. You're only going to be able to do so much in the beginning. But even one little positive move in that direction is going to be helpful for you. It's going to be helpful for you as you are going through this. And it may mean that at the end of the day, you may have only done one thing. That's one more thing than you did yesterday, right? Or it's one more thing than you did this morning. So look at every single thing that you did the course of the day. If you can find even just one thing in the beginning that's positive out of what you did, celebrate it. Be happy for yourself. Feel victorious. You've got to do what you can. You've got to start where you are. You've got to use what you have. All right, and so now we are ready for our next polling question. And this polling question has to do with how often do you consciously identify a challenge, negative thought patterns in your daily life? I'd like to see what your instances of that are. If you want to kind of comment along the lines of these poll questions, that's fine too. Just throw them in the chat, and we'll like I said, we'll get to them when we get to the part where we do the Q&A. So make sure if you need the CPEs to go ahead and answer those. Probably give it another 10 seconds or so. So go ahead and get those last minute answers in. We can go ahead and probably close this one out. There we go. Let's see what y'all had. Ooh. So we had no one say frequently, but we had some that say occasionally and some that said seldom. So at least some of y'all are at least occasionally or, seldom thinking about these things. So that's good. That's really good. It's good to see. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. And then the third thing, and like I said, these are just some things that you can probably take away with you today if you're not already doing them. Hopefully this will help you be motivated to do more of them if you're already doing some of these things. You want to cultivate a sense of gratitude and appreciation. And then on the next two slides, I will share some activities to get you started. So, because once you practice gratitude is the open door to abundance. And the more things that you can be grateful for or thankful for and start seeing those in print, what it's going to do is it's going to change the tapes in your brain. It's going to change your brain. It's going to change how you look at things in your brain. It's going to start taking some of that negative stuff that you've got going on in your brain. It's going to start making it more positive. It's going to switch it around. So on the next two slides, we're going to talk about what you can do. First of all, you can start a gratitude list. And this is basically just taking any kind of written notebook or journal or whatever. And I'm one of those that likes to use pen and pencil or pen and paper. This is actually a Rocket book, which is kind of like a step below what you would consider like a remarkable tablet or something like that. But it's kind of old school. I like the fact that I can write down stuff and then I can actually use the Rocketbook app and snap those things and save them electronically, because this is like a whiteboard. It wipes off. So that way you can have constant pages that you can write in all the time. And I find for me, because I was using a lot of paper and stuff, it saves trees, but it also helps me to kind of because for me, when I write stuff down is when I remember it. A lot of the people that are coming up today can type stuff out and they remember it better. But for me, old school, is writing it down. And the more that you write things down, and in this example, we're showing that today I'm grateful for, and then the affirmations can be real important. Some of those affirmations, you can actually go out on the internet and type up motivational quotes and things like that. And some of those you can use as your affirmations. And then you can put down and this is just a suggestion how you would organize this. This is not anything that you have to do in this way, but this gives you kind of a framework that you can take away today and start doing these. So, you can list all the things that you're grateful for today, your affirmations, and then your personal note of maybe what went well for you, what didn't go so well for you, and what you can do better. You can do that. And then at the end of the week, you can even kind of sum up everything and find out and just kind of synthesize it. Because when we synthesize it, when I think, for me anyways, when I learn the most about what I experienced that week and what I can do better for the next. And that way I can develop whatever goals I need to set for myself. And this isn't about goal setting by any means, but it kind of will help guide you into what you should be doing and how you should be handling yourself. And again, I just want to make sure I'm doing one on time. So I don't want to have to rush through any of this. Okay. So this is another thing that I ran across on the internet as well. And these are goals that we should be doing for ourselves as we're trying to change our mind, as we're trying to mold our mind into a more positive space. We want to fill our cup with kindness, love, understanding, hope, peace, and gratitude. And this is stuff that's going to take a while. Part of it, maybe you're going to have to change up who you hang out with. Some of you may end up having to go no contact with some people in your lives, or low contact. I don't know what that's going to look like for you. There's been some family members, based on what I shared with you earlier, I've had to go low contact or no contact with because they were just too toxic for me. Those are hard decisions, and they're not ones that you take lightly. You have to do what you need to do to help yourself become better and to become whole. But one thing that I've always stressed to people, and I always hope that you will understand, is there's always something to be thankful for, even in the midst of some of these things that are not good. You should be able to find a way, hopefully, to start taking some of these negatives and turning into positives. And that's kind of what this whole exercise about seeking gratitude and practicing gratitude is all about. And then another thing you can do is to create a vision board. Now, this vision board is actually hanging on my wall right over here. And I took a snapshot of it. I did this probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and I do look at it every once in a while. Because what I did with this is I wanted to kind of envision the type of future that I wanted. And one of the things I wanted to do is to be able to have more time off, to be able to spend doing things that I like to do. I've always got losing weight on there, and that seems to be one of the constants and all. But one of the other things I put on there is, bright side, and in that respect, it's kind of, looking things on the bright side. Talking about great second careers. I go my own way, star, and I like chocolate, so I have that on there as well. And that it's time. It's time to make those changes. So this was actually done in a group activity where we were given these huge boards that we had magazines that we cut out pieces of magazines, and then we put these things together. So I do look at this and I do focus on it. And then I try to visualize what I was when I was at that point to see if I've achieved any of those things. And to the extent that I can say, yes, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. So this might be something you might find helpful, maybe getting a small group of your friends together that want to go on this similar journey and to get some of those things done. So like I said, it's a very acute visual here that I have here, that I love it. All right, so here's our third polling question. So on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the least likely, how open are you to learning and implementing new strategies to improve your mindset? And again, if you need CPEs, you'll need to answer something. We'll probably give it about another 20 seconds or so. Go ahead and get your answers in before we close it out. Right, I think we're good. And let's see what everybody had to say. So it looks like the majority of you are open to learning new things and implementing these new strategies or any new strategies to improve. So that's good. That's good to see. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And maybe those that are in the lower ends are still kind of ruminating or things on that. So that's good. I mean, that's good that you're honest. Again, we want to reiterate that mindset is everything. Your success begins and ends with mindset. In between, it's grit that carries you through. So I found that to be an interesting quote. So let's see what the next one is. So there are no, and this is something a lot of us tend to forget sometimes, is that, you know, we're not here by accident. We're not here on this earth by accident. There are no extra pieces in the universe. Everyone is here because he or she has a place to fill, and every piece must fit itself into this big jigsaw puzzle. So you're not here by accident. You're not here today by accident. You're not here on this earth by accident. There's a purpose for you. To the extent that you have not figured out what it is yet, then, you know, don't panic. There's something out there for you. And it may be in the midst of some of the chaos that you've been through in your life, or if you're at a career crossroads, this is a good time. Usually the end of the year like this is a good year to focus on new beginnings, because new beginnings usually come from some other beginning's end. So I'm glad that you're here today, and hopefully this is helping you. So here are some resources that I put together. And like I said, they're going to be in my slide deck that you'll have available to you. I actually have a journey of self-discovery book that most of this material came out of, and a few other resources that I have in here that will help you. So Power Positive Thinking is all is a timeless book. There's also different things in here that hopefully you'll have a chance to check out and see how those things work. So now we have a few minutes left over for some Q&A, and then I have a few other little wrap-up things that I want to do after that. So if you have any specific questions that y'all want to ask, go ahead and throw those in the chat and we'll address them here. And I'll even look at some of them myself. Let's see what we got. It doesn't look like you'll have any particular questions. How about anything that may resonate with you as to what's been said today? If you could think of one or two takeaways, what would you say? Maybe you can put those in the chat, and I would love to read them out. I don't have to tell you, I don't have to name you by name, but if you want to throw those in there. I had someone write that they just can't seem to leave their job and go full time on their own. She knows she's capable, but she's afraid. I get it. I get it. It can be very scary to not know where you're going to end up. I had an instance when I was working. I was on the job for 2 weeks, and then I had and this was back when my youngest was like a baby. Daycare called me and told me that he had a temperature of 100 degrees and I needed to come and get him. I had 2 people that were normally in the office that were out doing something. When I emailed them or when I called them, I think it was, yeah, I had to call them. I had to have called them to tell them that I had to leave right away. And it wasn't a public facing office, so it wasn't like I was, had to be the only one there to keep the office open or anything. It was in a back office. the response that I got from this lady just really upset me to the point where I just ended up quitting on the spot. She was like, well, can't you just wait until we get back? We'll be back in another hour or whatever. And I was like, no, I can't wait. They told me I needed to come right then. And there was some other things going on with that. That was just a bad position for me. And so I ended up leaving. I wrote a note. I got all my stuff together. Actually, know what I did? No, what I did is I went and picked up my son, went back to that office, packed everything up, wrote a note. I mean, I was really nice, and I never went back. And I don't use that job on my resume. I guess the thing that I'm getting at is that I don't know how to answer that question, but just to say that what you may be afraid of may be controlling your actions right now, but you've got to look at what pain are you enduring right now as opposed to what pain you could be focusing by making that change. And only you can answer that question. And it might even be a good idea for you to find some trusted person who works with careers to kind of sound some of these things out. And maybe they can help you with some goals, maybe a life coach or a career coach. But I hope you find the answer to that, because time is too short for us to be in a job that we cannot stand. And I can tell you, I'm one of the first ones that have lived in various jobs that I could not stand. So anyway, I hope you find the answer to that. So, and I had someone say, I love this, great job, thank you. I'm glad that you're finding this very helpful. And the person that responded to that said, thank you. I hope, if nothing else, you get some clarity on that. So, but anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up. Here's my contact information here. And I
Kathy,
know that
sorry, Kathy. We actually do have one question in the question and answer portion.
oh, okay. I
Yeah.
didn't see that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We actually have someone, an anonymous attendee, that came in as an anonymous question, and they asked, do you have advice for people who might be unfamiliar with therapy? From your experience, when is self-help not enough and therapy a helpful idea?
Okay, well, just from my experience, I would say that I would go the self-help route regardless, just to start. I mean, there's various books out there that you can read that will help you with some of these things. And some of those resources that I share on the slide will be helpful for you to at least start digging into some of that, because there'll be resources in there that I haven't shared that are within those resources. But when it's not enough, you'll kind of know. And I know that sounds kind of trite, but you'll kind of know. It's like when I was going through the pandemic and some of the things I was dealing with through the pandemic, and it wasn't just the pandemic, it was just a confluence of different things coming together at the same time that precipitated me to seek therapy, and it really did help me. But I would say start with the self-help route first, and then if you see that you need to actually talk to somebody, then that would be the time that you would want to reach out and talk to somebody. Hopefully that makes sense. But always try to go the self-help route first. So that's my goal on that. So anything else real quick before, and we do have a little bit of time left, and I think we got one more poll question, but I wanted to go through these last few things pretty good. And thanks for pointing that out. So anyway, these are how you can get in touch with me. Connect with me if you haven't already. And I would love to have you be a part of some of the groups that I frequent. I'm usually on a lot of the Facebook forums for QuickBooks, but we do have a few other groups as well that we're on. And if any of you want to talk to me about anything, reach out to me through my Calendly link. And I would love to do that. And so, like I was saying before, a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you today comes from a book that I wrote. And it's actually published on Amazon. It's called New Beginnings. And it's a journey of self-discovery. It's designed to be a 365-day journey to kind of help you determine how to get in the right mindset and discover your purpose for life and work. So what the book does is kind of built on these principles, with mindset being a big piece of it, and focus is another, as well as, you know, developing good habits and a few other things. So the first few weeks is just going over some of these concepts and having you think through them. And then we get into trying to figure out what your why, what, and purpose is, and also your special word. And then you get into actually journaling. But before you can get to the part where you're actually, and you're journaling all the way, but you're not journaling as far as, you know, your purpose, but you're thinking about these things, kind of synthesizing the information. So anyway, this book is designed to get you on this path, and it's a year-long endeavor. And I'm thinking about at the beginning of the year, for those of you who have purchased this book, and some of y'all have, and some of y'all may not have done so. I'm going to get a cohort together to kind of go through everything at the start of the year. So I'm actually going through it myself to kind of test out, you know, some of the information and kind of update and feature additions. But this book, if you take it at what it's being offered for, it should help you to kind of get a framework to get that going. But it is a year-long endeavor, I will tell you that. And so I will let our moderator here go ahead and throw those links into the chat, so that way you'll have those. And right now I am running a special on the digital version, and I think the Amazon version is on sale for like 35 something. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's a big book. It's like about this thick. I didn't bring out a copy to show you, but it's a pretty big book. But a lot of that is, you know, journaling and stuff. So anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about where I am now. A year ago, we were looking at moving, and we actually started this process a few years back. We actually came down to Florida. I'm from the Atlanta area. We came down, was looking for some property. We were going to move to Melbourne initially, and then we kind of had to back off of that. And then a couple of years later, we ended up coming down to Ormond Beach, and we had visited and that's near Daytona, you know, where the Speedway is. And we came and visited a few places, and then we actually spent a couple of days around the time that Ian came through. And this picture that I'm showing you right here is actually the spot where we ended up settling on our house. And it was already being built. I mean, the cinder blocks and everything are already being up for the framework and everything. And so this was the spot. Based on this and how the lanai was laid out. The lanais are a fancy word for porch, back porch. So the way that this pond is the clouds, as you can see, back behind the trees over there, where there's other houses backing up to that. That's where the sun rises. And so the sun sets at the front of the house. So in the afternoons, you know, you just have this gorgeous view of the lake, and can just sit there without burning up during the summer. So this was the day that we actually put the contract on the house. 24 hours later, Ian came through. And of course, those of you who know about how bad the hurricanes were down there. This part of the area didn't get hit really badly, but Daytona and some places got bad. So fast forward a few months. And one of the things I like about this property is that we have all sorts of wildlife that come out here. There's deer, there's different flying birds. We've seen some eagles, some falcons. We have egrets that frequent our ponds, but we have a family of 3 sandhill cranes. Any of you that follow me on Facebook know that I like to post pictures of the cranes. One of the babies got eaten earlier, but one is still alive. And this was just around the neighborhood. They were walking around, and they actually spent a few minutes out here because one of our neighbors fed them. We wasn't supposed to feed them, but they ended up you know, hanging out for a while. And so I was able to get this picture through our screen door, and it had been raining that day, which is why we didn't go outside. But here's a picture of the 2 parents just out for a stroll on a sunny day. So one thing I can say is that, it took us a while to get to the same idea to be in sync to move. And that was a big decision, because part of what happened after that is that, I can say truly that this is my happy place. We're not that far from the beach, so we can go to the beach on a regular basis. But I like just sitting on the back porch and being able to observe some of this wildlife. It's really neat. But we took that chance. And even without being able to sell our house, because my daughter is living in the house that we left behind in Atlanta. So we took a chance, and I took a chance of possibly losing some customers. And now I'm having to rebuild back my business again because of the relocation. Even though I did keep a few of my clients, I'm having to regroup and refocus, which is why that book that I came out with was really so helpful, because it's helped me to kind of decide what my path is going to be going forward. So, it is a worthwhile endeavor. But if I hadn't already been in the right mindset to, want to make those changes, then we would still be in Atlanta, being stuck in a place where I didn't want to be. So we took a chance, and I'm glad that we did. So anyway, here's the final polling question. And then we should be wrapping up. We're almost at the top of the hour. Thank you all for being here. So which one of these can you see implementing today? And if you answer other, please share in the comments. Or share in the comments anything. We would love to hear what you have to say. I'll give you a couple more minutes to complete that, and then we'll close it out. Seconds. We have 3 minutes until we're at time. All right, I think that's good. Let's see what y'all have to say. Start a daily gratitude practice. Yes, that's one thing you can do right away in identify and reframe negative thoughts. No one wants to create a vision board. Well, maybe that's more of a group activity or something. I'm really surprised that nobody answered incorporate mindfulness in your daily routine, but that would probably follow after you start doing the daily gratitude and identifying, reframing, and negative thoughts. So that's actually pretty good. Not too bad. All right. So with that said, I want to thank you all for your attendance today, and we hope to see you. Hopefully I'll have a chance to do something in the future. I might do another topic from that same book. Maybe developing good habits would be a good one. But we would love to see you. Hopefully y'all have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Y'all take care, everybody.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you for all of that. I would actually love to make a vision board for myself. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Have a good day. Bye.